for the last couple of weeks, last 8-9 weeks, we have discussed principles in kashrus in general. A lot of that and more all comes into play with regards to Pesach. Now, tonight is a particularly opportune time to begin about, which means in 15 days' time will be Shushan Purim, and in 30 days' time will be Shushan Purim, and another 30 days will be Pesach. So the halacha is that you're supposed to start learning Hilchos Pesach a month before Pesach, but we're not just learning halachas; we're going to be learning principles. So there's a lot to talk about. What you have in front of you, I printed this out from Rav Melamad's Pnei Halacha because he provides an excellent summary for just general concepts of chametz, and we're going to test a lot of these principles against things that we have learned, and specific applications that are unique to Pesach and also general to everything else. In a few weeks' time, we're gonna spend some time understanding all of the halachas of kashering utensils, because that is key to Pesach, but also to moving house and kashering items that you mess up in the kitchen. It happens from time to time, and certainly when it comes to Pesach, it happens pretty regularly. So the din is like this: Arba mitzvahs be'isur chametz. There are four unique mitzvahs with regards to the prohibition of chametz. Four unique mitzvahs. Some of them are specifically unique to Pesach, and some apply to other items as well. Arba mitzvahs me'atorah oskas be'isur chametz Pesach. There are four mitzvahs that have to do with chametz on Pesach. Shalosh mitzvahs lo yisaseh mitzvah aseh achas. There are three negative prohibitions and one positive obligation. Right? In general, there are many ways of separating mitzvahs, of dividing up mitzvahs. Right? There are 613 biblical commandments. 248 of them are positive, 365 of them are negative, and only like 70-ish of them are applicable today. Right? The vast majority of mitzvahs are on a biblical level. We don't. I mean, certainly in Chutz La'aretz, in anywhere outside of the land of Israel, we don't have applicable today because we don't have a Beis Hamikdash and we don't have Korbanos and Shemitah, right, every 7 years. So that's true on a rabbinic level today. And Yovel every 50 years is true on a rabbinic level today. Right? Much of this is rabbinic. The original biblical obligation we don't have today to the same extent. I mean, there has been since 1948, 1967, a resurrection of many mitzvahs that were not applicable on a biblical level that now are. But practically speaking, Pesach is somewhat unique in that there are many biblical mitzvahs that are extant and applicable today. The first of them, and the most serious of them, is Ha'isar Rishon, Shelo le'achol chametz, not to eat chametz. That's number one. Don't eat chametz. Now we're gonna have to figure out exactly what chametz is, right? The definition of chametz is not simple. We'll get there in a bit. But the Torah tells us, the pasuk says, "V'lo ye'achel chametz," do not consume chametz. We have, in addition to the prohibition of eating chametz, also a prohibition of benefiting from chametz, which is not true of most items that are not kosher, right? Meaning, I'm not allowed to eat bacon, but I can sell bacon, right? I mean, to non-Jews. I'm not allowed to eat nevela, right? An animal that died without being shechted. But if I have an animal that, the shochet messed up, didn't do a good job, right? Decapitated the animal, whatever, stabbed it in the face instead of shechting it, right? Messed up. Now I have a nevela. What do I do with that? I can sell that. That's okay. I'm allowed to benefit from it. I'm allowed to have stock in, major, cattle processing in the United States. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I can buy it, I can sell it, I can benefit from it. I can't sell it to a Jew, certainly intentionally, but I'm allowed to own it. Chametz is different. Chametz is different. I'm not allowed to benefit from it at all. Not allowed to benefit from chametz. There's another very common Isser that also has an Isser Hana, that has a prohibition of benefit that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. Milk and meat, right? Milk and meat you're not allowed to benefit from. So if you have meat and milk cooked together, that product is also Asur B'Hana, you're not allowed to benefit from. There's a few other things that were...
So you can't buy stock in McDonald's?
So McDonald's is interesting, assuming that it is both meat and milk, which is right. Assuming
Well, at what point is it bitzel, you know?
right. Assuming that the ingredients are meat and milk.
It's 1% milk and 1%
Right.
meat. The rest is filling.
Yeah. It's whatever it is.
It could be enter business, into the restaurant business as a financial partner, someone who's running, let's say, a bistro where they serve a cheeseburger.
Yeah. So that's interesting. That is a different question.
About the provenance of the ingredients they are, which is
Right. Assuming that profits, assuming that all the products are actual meat and actual milk. So, and it is from animals that are behemoths tahoros, meaning it is a kosher animal, even if it's not shechted, but a cow plus milk, right, would make a basar b'chalav cheeseburger. So if you are whatever it is, Smith, Jones and Cohen Enterprises, so you're a partner in that business, buying and selling meat and milk products, meaning basar b'chalav products, that would be problematic.
Wow.
That would absolutely be problematic. That is not the same thing as owning stock in a publicly traded company.
Not
Even
to ask if you have like a retirement fund or something like that.
Not a
you
problem.
Invest in things.
right, yeah, well, because the financial instruments today are like very, very, very far removed from actual ownership of meat. Meaning, you don't own. Let's say that you are a 10% shareholder in McDonald's, right? That's a lot of money, right? But let's imagine that you're a 10%, right? You're a 10% shareholder in McDonald's. Even a 10% shareholder in McDonald's, you cannot go into a McDonald's and ask for a tenth of that burger. You don't actually have any rights over that burger. What you own is not meat and milk. The thing that you own is a fiction of corporate legal identity that is not actually a burger.
So then if I'm a franchisee and I'm just the money man behind and I'm not even that interested in what they're doing, but part of my thing is I got a whole region of McDonald's in the southeast.
Yeah, that's fine.
But those companies would own.
He's saying like
inventory.
you're brick and mortar,
So
like you're
what's
part of the
that's
operation.
not-
No,
Oh,
Meaning, if you own a piece of, meaning you own 10% of local mom and pop burger joint, like you own part of that business. You are a partner in that business. You own part of that business. You own all of the assets and resources and liabilities of that business.
Right.
You own part of the burgers there. Like, strictly speaking, you own those burgers.
Prohibited for a non-Jew to have meat and cheese. So
Correct.
what's the-
But you're not allowed to get benefit from meat and milk. That's the Isser Hana.
Yeah. So, okay, maybe for a later time, I am curious about how we draw a distinction between a more arm's length shareholder versus, let's say you're a silent partner, like a non-managing partner in owning the local restaurant, right? You have no ability to exercise influence over the operations. You merely provided some capital. You have a right to some of the dividends or profits, but you have no operation.
So that would most likely be okay, because what you own is not the burgers.
Yes.
So it's
You don't-
really about that. It's
Right.
Really about.
So it's more.
Owning-
What do you own? What do you own? What is the thing that you're
So
trading
you
in?
walk in and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Boda,
Right,
you got a problem."
right.
But if they're like, you walk in and you're
Tell you what
just,
you
you want the regular,
Own the-
you know what I mean? Like, if you own 10% of McDonald's,
Right.
and you walk
Right.
into McDonald's, nobody
They
knows,
created that voluntarily.
you know, like, you're not cutting someone's paycheck, and they're like, "Oh, thanks, Mr. Boda."
Right.
You know,
Meaning,
that's
if-
the issue.
If you own meat and milk, and you're trading in meat and milk. So I knew a guy that actually.
Earmark your seed capital. No. We're only going towards rent. My 10% has nothing to do with inventory. This is purely monthly rent.
Right.
Just stick to the meat or the cheese.
Yeah.
Right.
My capital
Two
outlay
Jewish
is-
guys, one owns the meat, one
Yeah.
owns the cheese. We figured
Two
it.
different entities.
Right.
I need to employ
This
this guy
sesame seed
and
right here.
formally sell over the meat and milk to him at a certain point in the process.
Right.
We'll make it all very kosher.
Yeah, I knew a guy that actually had like a Philly cheesesteak restaurant in South Jersey. Like, not a religious guy. His kids actually became from, and then like slowly but surely he like got out of their business. But like he literally owned a Basa B'chalaf store. Like that was his business. Like-
It's like
cheesesteak is made with cheese whiz, so we're right back to the 1%.
Right.
It's like
It's
we're still
Mitchell
alive
Lawrence and cheese.
with milk and meat that if you have like 1/60th,
Right.
1/60th of like a drop.
So that's
relative-
fine.
So it's like your share ownership in a company. It's like
Yeah.
you own McDonald's like 1/60. It's like
So I'll tell you what.
it's not even trade.
I'll tell you where this
You're fine.
becomes like massively like
Fine,
relevant
don't worry about it.
is for Pesach, because you're not allowed to own chametz on Pesach. That is prohibition number 3. We haven't gone there yet, right? You're not allowed to own chametz on Pesach. So let's say that you own who Oreos are owned by who? Nabisco, right? You have Nabisco stock, right? Does that mean that you own chametz on Pesach?
No.
No. No.
Because you have no control.
You don't own any Oreos, right? You
As soon as I buy them, they're gone. I eat them.
right? You don't own the
They don't
Oreos,
last a day.
right? You don't own any Oreos. You can't like go into like a store and be like, I am a shareholder in the
Really
biscuit.
easy to prove.
No,
It's
those
like,
are already,
Right?
those are already sold.
we have gotten
You can't go to the
Oreos,
disco
we're like,
factory and just take
nah.
things.
Right. That I mean, you
Yeah.
One of the
Got
companies
no
in Oregon
Oreos.
take things. They have no rights to do.
right,
The CEO of the company would.
right, maybe, right. If he's also a shareholder, I don't know, like it's
I want to see Bob.
Do you work for a
walk into
company?
Disney store and just start taking plushies out. the
right,
shelves.
correct.
Can you work for
Uh,
a company? Can I be the CEO of a company
Ah.
that makes Buzzer Hollow?
No, because then your salary is generated from those sales. That's different.
What's the salary and
Yeah,
and
Because
I'll tell
your
you.
earnings come from those sales. You
and every
you are
time a McDonald's hamburger is sold, my stock goes up.
no.
Your salary you pay.
Because you're saying it's all
you
based
pay
off of
tax
like
on direct.
gambling, basically.
Like, if you're-
Well, no,
if
what
you're
you-
lucky-
what
It's
you
all based
own-
off, like public perception
Yes.
of the company.
There's a
not-
What you own is a financial
Your
instrument.
dividend is not even close.
I don't feel like that's a lot
Okay.
of discrimination.
So, but if you have a
Your
ownership of
SP's
a private
different, that's the
company,
difference.
Oh,
Right. So that
so private
so
companies are more.
it could get a little dicier.
Okay.
I mean, although today
But you
the
can clearly see-
You're saying
Yeah.
the New York
Grow.
Stock Exchange
You can
basically
grow
creates
how
a
you
financial
do
product. It's not
Correct.
actually
Shareholder
a
taking
position in a
dividends.
business the same way that a lot of
And
people
actually
would.
being an
Yes.
employee of a company.
I mean, now this is a much broader discussion of like how to view financial instruments in the eyes of halacha. It is fascinatingly like broad, meaning the concept of a legal person, right? Like not a human person, a legal person, as like American law identifies like a company as a legal person. So that's actually a very I mean, the Torah identifies certain industries as legal as a legal person. 2 examples. Just fascinatingly, the Torah gives us a obligation of truma and meiser. Truma is the percentage of your field of your grain that belongs to the kohen, right? So that is both financial and also ritual, meaning only a kohen is allowed to eat truma. A non-kohen is not allowed to eat truma. That is fundamentally different from meiser, which is the 10% that goes to the Levi. The 10% that goes to the Levi, you give 10% of your field to the Levi, right? 10% of your product. He takes that, but he can sell it, he can trade it, he can give it out, he can invite you for a barbecue, right? He can make you burgers and use the meiser, grain as the bun for the burger. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But financially, it belongs to the Levium. Which Levi does it belong to?
The one you give it to?
Oh, the Bureau of Levy Affairs.
Right. So both of those answers are true. It belongs to whichever levy you give it to. You have the right to choose your levy,
Oh, so now it gets political.
right? You can choose whatever levy you want to give it to. But if you didn't give it to any levy, you have stolen from whom?
All the ladies.
All of them. From that legal entity called Shevet Levi. Meaning you have what's called the Tavas Hana, meaning the right to choose which levy to give it to. You, the original owner, custodian, steward over the levy's money, you can choose which levy to direct it to. But it belongs to the Levium.
So we're tipping them for good service?
Something like that, right? The incentive for the levy to provide good services. Right? Your local levy.
I see
What?
interesting
They
business
ran the whole
all
thing.
over.
They don't.
Oh,
when
they
go
don't
back-
really need that.
No, when they go back.
That's tuition. That's tuition. They teach your kids.
Interesting business written all
Levy,
over.
did they have land? Shouldn't
No.
they have land? So the only
Levy
shit
doesn't-
that did
You
not-
might
They do not have land, right? No, that's a Mitzrayim. In Israel, the Levium do not own land,
2% of the fact, I'll make sure you get 8%.
right? Levium don't have land. They are paid off
I
welfare.
got another business for
What
you.
you're saying, why you brought that up, how we're talking about complex
Right.
financial, and the Torah can.
So the Torah has Shevet Levi as a corporation,
Right.
But possibly the best example of a legal person in halacha is the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is an enterprise that you can donate things to, and those things are then owned by the Beis Hamikdash.
By the Kohanim and the Levium? or
No, by the
separately
Beis Hamikdash. By the Beis
But
Hamikdash.
then who makes the decision on when to
Oh,
use
the
these?
board of directors.
Oh, there's a board of directors of the Beis Hamikdash, meaning Kohanim, Levium, Sanhedrin that are involved in like running that enterprise called Beis
It's like
Hamikdash.
donating to the shul.
Yeah, meaning there's
Go with them, it stays with the institution, so as the people cycle out, the assets remain.
the assets belong to the Beis Hamikdash. Like belong, meaning, and if you make a donation to the Beis Hamikdash, it now is owned by the Beis Hamikdash, and you can't undo that. It belongs to the Beis Hamikdash now. Now it happens to be that there's important ritual laws of things that are owned by the Beis Hamikdash, but that is kicked off by the financial ownership. Things are owned by the Mikdash.
Man, that is a world of politics I would never want to step foot in.
So
It's just amazing how.
I would never want. I'd be like,
right, 100%.
Just-
There's an interesting discussion.
Some guys don't have your humility, they go and they start overturning tables, making accusations.
So, by the way,
Making a real note, guys like
And,
that get themselves set to hang out to dry.
the
I will- I
Gemaras,
will
the
walk
Mishnayos in
through
Shkalim,
from
for example,
From afar.
the Mishnayos in Shkalim describe, and the Yerushalmi in Shkalim, the Machlokes in the Rambam, Ravid, how this was actually done. They had very complex accounting in the Beis Hamikdash because, at least according to one version, the way that the Rishonim understand it is that there were dues assessments that were assessed to the entirety of the Jewish people to pay for this institution called the Beis Hamikdash.
We
Meaning-
still have building funds.
Absolutely, and the way that it was done is they had complex accounting to try to figure out, to project what are going to be the financial needs of the Beis Hamikdash for the up and coming year. And then what they would do is they would figure out what percentage of people are we going to assume are actually going to pay, because not everybody pays. And then they would figure out, okay, this is X amount is what we need to raise.
Is there a-
X percentage is how many people we can assume are going to pay. If we distribute that up equally, so that means that the dues assessment for this year is,
X.
X divided by population. Everybody is going to pay this amount. And when you went to the Beis Hamikdash, there were different coffers. There were different places to put your money. There was this year's dues, which was one amount. There was last year's dues, and then there's future allocations. Like there was complex accounting going on there, and a lot of money was necessary because they were buying korbanos every single day for the Jewish people to bring to the Beis Hamikdash on behalf of the Jewish people, and that had to be from communal funds. You couldn't have like one rich dude saying like, "I'm going to sponsor the year." It had to be
Why?
communal funds because it is brought on behalf of the community. So it has to be communal funds.
Whatever that means.
Meaning
I get what it
it,
means.
it
but
can't
I
it
mean,
can't be like
Someone wrote a
dedicated
check.
by.
Someone wrote a check that they're taking it somehow.
The money
Putting
just-
it in a different
money
fund.
just appeared.
Right.
Yeah.
So
They want to.
meaning that concept of a legal person, we have Shevet Levi and we have the Beis Hamikdash, like we have these concepts in halacha of legal entities, and this comes up with regards to owning things that you are not allowed to get benefit from. So chametz on Pesach, for example, or basar b'chalav, or items of avodah zara. You're not allowed to own avodah zara items. Idol worship, right? You're not allowed to benefit from idol worship.
Horoscopes.
Or I'm going to say something crazy, and you're going to look at me and you're going to say you're out of your mind, and then I'm going to tell you the relevance of this. You know what else is also bahana?
Yeah.
A dead body. You are not allowed to benefit from a dead body. Now you're looking at me saying, like, what kind of like necromancer religion are we talking about here? I'll tell you exactly. How do you pay the guy that drives the hearse?
Appreciation.
Right? How's he different from the guy that's selling the cheeseburger? He's benefiting from a dead body. How do you pay the grave diggers?
So how to do
Complicated, right? So these
They're not
these
selling the dead body.
no, but you are benefiting from it.
Yeah, but like,
So
So,
that has a very
they're selling
specific.
the service of.
So-
I'm allowed to sell the hamburger holders for the burger cheese.
Can you be a delivery man for McDonald's?
When?
No,
You would say no. Yeah,
No.
it's a loaded question.
Right. can't be a delivery man for McDonald's.
Wait,
No, but he's.
wait, can't we consider
Dude.
that shroud transaction?
So-
No, you
so
gotta-
there's-
You
again-
gotta quit your job at Uber Eats, man. I'm sorry.
Right. So there's
That's
Oh, that's interesting.
so right. So Uber Eats becomes an interesting question, right? Well, most of the time,
I'm telling my kids they can't eat this.
No,
one.
what
Exactly.
that's good. What
Yeah.
if you sell like the wrapper and the mold?
right. So again, there's
That's
ways of couching it, making
What if I
it
make
not.
recipes that are meat.
Yes. So what?
If you're a chef and you make you have a
Also
blog and you
complicated.
talk about
Also complicated. Yeah. Yeah.
complicated.
Well,
Doesn't mean no.
well, a lot of these things are complicated. There's also there's a lot of applications there. I'm sharing
about
this.
meat and milk for when
Say what?
we're talking a lot about meat and milk. We should be talking
No,
about
because we
milk.
went
So-
on Hana. the concept
Istar
of-
Hana. Istar Hana. So what I'm saying is the concept of an Istar Hana is not limited to chametz. It is fairly broad and has some real applications that come up pretty regularly. But prohibition number one is eating, and as a secondary prohibition to that, there is the prohibition of benefiting from. If you take a look at the second paragraph here, Ha'isur Hasheni. Ha'isur Hasheni, middle of the page over here, Ha'isur Hasheni. So he says, Ha'isur Hasheni shelo yimatzei chametz b'shuso. That you should not have chametz in your possession, which is shivas yom sa'or li yimatzei bevateichem. You are not allowed to have sa'or. We're going to define the difference between chametz and sa'or in a moment. But that is a second prohibition, and a third prohibition is shelo yira'eh chametz b'shutenu. Shenemar matzos ya'achel es shivas hayamim v'lo yira'eh lecha chametz v'lo yira'eh lecha sa'or b'chol gvulecha. And that is the question of ownership, specifically of a specific amount of chametz. And we'll get to those definitions in a moment. We should differentiate before that between chametz and sa'ar, or what the Art Scroll translation will translate as, I think, leaven and yeast. And this is incredibly relevant, especially in a post-COVID world where everybody made sourdough bread, right? There are two things that you talk about when you're making sourdough. The bread itself that you make, that is called chametz, leaven, right? That is bread. But then there's something called sa'ar. What is sa'ar?
that the starter?
Starter, yeast. Now, the starter is interesting because the starter is categorically inedible. It's not food,
Would you be sick if you ate it?
probably. Right?
So no.
Don't eat it.
That's
What do you mean? You eat dead yeast all the time. What's the problem?
That's not dead yeast. That's a live yeast. One.
What do you mean?
Starter.
I'm
So-
saying if you eat
It just
dead-
grows.
Yeah, I know, but yeast is you eat dead yeast all the time.
Right.
You drink dead
No.
yeast.
But all that is and enzymes that are growing. It's very, very sour. It's not an enjoyable thing to eat.
You're saying yeast is not food.
Right.
But
The
dead
pure
yeast
that is the
is.
starter.
When you take
But dead yeast is.
Well, it's an ingredient.
when you take
And you're
yeast,
also
No,
and
not
dead
at
yeast
the amounts.
is food.
when you
When
take
the
have-
stuff in
when
the
you have-
packet-
when you have a certain type of when you have like a certain types of wine, there's dead yeast and it adds
Yes.
a certain flavor.
Yes. So
It has a
meaning,
creaminess, a butteriness.
but if you extract that exclusively, it's probably not something that you'd
No
enjoy
one
eating.
eats that.
Right.
That's the
So the
No
Torah
one
describes
goes
two
after
things.
it as a food stuff.
that's the stuff that just keeps other bread growing. It's like it just keeps going.
Right.
No,
You
I
make,
I understand that. I'm saying yeast is in food that we eat,
of course,
but we don't eat the live yeast.
that's the
That's
point.
what he's talking about.
So, or the
The starter
starter,
is not food.
the starter of your bread,
It can become.
you take a little bit of that, mix it in with your water and
I
flour,
understand.
and then it turns into bread.
I'm saying like we eat it when it's dead, but we don't eat it when it's alive. It's not food when it's alive, but it can be food when it's dead.
Well,
No, it's
Or is it
food when it's
never
mixed
food?
in with stuff. It's never food.
It's never food.
if you were to have the dead yeast utterly on its own, you would not consider that to be a food item. It just happens to be that it's a non-food item that is inoffensive enough to consume that when it's in your wine or in your bread and you
But
eat
it
the
adds, but
actual
like
food-
certain types of winemaking uses,
Yes, they use, of course.
and that adds.
And
a
in
certain
order
type
to
of
make
flavor
bread, that is
that's more
what you need.
desirable.
Yes, it is what you need. But the item itself, the yeast itself, is not edible. It's not
Neither-
something.
neither
It's not a
is-
food.
Neither is
Is
food that's
salt
not cooked that needs to be cooked.
Yes.
So that would be the same thing.
Yes and no. And I'll
Wheat-
tell
wheat
I'll tell
before
you what the
it's
difference is.
processed?
I'll tell you what the difference is.
Well,
And this is
I was
important to
just wondering,
understand.
Is salt a relevant comparison point here? In that salt is not food. You don't just eat salt and get nourishment from it.
Correct.
It's just that it can have a relevant role as an accessory to actual food, but at no point does the salt itself become like a sovereign food stuff.
Right. It's not a food. It is
It's in the same halachic category.
Like,
to a certain extent.
I
And
want to know what else is in this halachic category.
I'll tell you why.
What else is in this halachic category?
We'll get there.
What's it called? Sar?
Sa'ar and chametz.
Sar. So what else
So-
is in the same
so
halachic category?
I'll explain why. Is that when it comes to things that one is forbidden to eat, we've discussed this once or twice before. In order for something to be forbidden to eat, it needs to be food.
So
Needs to be
purely
edible.
rotten meat that would make you sick is just beyond the point of food.
It's not food,
consideration.
right? It's not food. Sa'ar is a unique halacha in that it is not edible, but it is also forbidden on Pesach.
So this is rotten comics.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
Like
It is.
we take it all to its farthest possible extent in comics, which is why you have like the blow torches.
Well, so Sa'ar interestingly is not a like rabbinic. It is the biblical law, mitzvah de'oraisa, not to have bread and also not to have your starter, right?
So we go for both.
So both of them are destroyed. Now it's actually interesting. I got this question a number of times, like during the 2 Pesachs of COVID, while people like very interested in making sourdough, is people wanted to.
What's the sourdough connection?
Everybody was making sourdough during COVID.
Everyone was at home, so everyone made a podcast and everyone did start.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and then I don't know how many podcasts were made about sourdough, but you have to assume that there's been diagram.
Probably. Right.
That's the world's worst.
Yeah. There was like a lot. There was like a lot of, and that also became even more intense with like all the flour shortages and then people stopped making the sourdough stuff. But whatever. Big kids are people wanted to know like, well, I have my sourdough. The sourdough starter is like is the most boring pet that you can own because you need to feed it. You need to keep on giving it food. The food being flour that you just chuck in there, and then it eats it and grows it ferments, and then you chuck out half of it, and then it keeps growing. And right, that's what a starter is. It is a very boring pet. It's also the Issa Deraisa and Pesach. So people wanted to know, well, can I sell my starter to a non-Jew and then buy it back after Pesach? Yes, just like chametz, you
Do
can.
still get to feed it and maintain it, or do you need to have it? be
They
a
would need
starter
to,
set?
yeah,
You need a starter sitter.
exactly,
So in a world of only Jews, sourdough would cease to exist.
yeah, every year, every
Why?
year.
You have to feed it every day. You
We
can go
have
8 days without
recreate
eating.
our starters.
What?
Do you know how sourdough?
Yes.
Have you made sourdough? today?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't make sourdough but I answered a lot of
How
shilas about
often
it.
do you need to feed it?
At regularly, like every 2 or 3 days, if I'm not mistaken.
You need a starter sitter.
That
If you go on
sounds awesome.
vacation,
Yeah.
You need to hire a local team to come to your house and feed your
Right,
starter.
feed your starter, otherwise it's gonna die.
Business idea.
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't be able to benefit.
Bad business idea.
I know,
Right.
I wouldn't be able to make money.
That's mine.
Yeah, mine as well. It's okay,
Business is
Baruch
spending
Hashem.
money.
Okay, so there is a fourth mitzvah when it comes to the mitzvahs of Pesach, and that is the biblical obligation of getting rid of chametz and sa'ar. So there is the prohibition of ownership of yeast and leaven. There's the prohibition of eating and benefiting, and then there is also the obligation of getting rid of it, destroying it, making sure that there is none in your home before Pesach begins. There is something very, very important and unique that we need to discuss about chametz that has many, 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 many applications in the world of halacha. And that is, chametz is a peculiar substance that today is perfectly permissible to eat. But on Pesach, it is completely forbidden. Now, why is this relevant? Because we have different principles with regards to getting rid of tastes and flavors of things that are permissible and things that are forbidden. This is what's referred to in halacha as hetera bala or isura bala. What flavor was absorbed? Something permissible or something not permissible? I'll give you an example. If you have a parav pan that you accidentally cooked milk in, so now that pan is milchik. Is it forbidden?
No.
No,
No.
no.
It's milchik, right? The pan is milchik. Okay, good. So you have your milchik pan. You have a fleshik pan. But you got confused. You thought that you were using the milchik one. Well, let's look at pot, right? You thought that you were going to use the milchik one, but you accidentally used the fleshik one. And what you made in your fleshik pan was pasta. Is pasta milchik or fleshik? Parav, right? So I made pasta in a fleshik pot. What is the status of that pasta now?
Meat
Flesh.
equipment.
Meat equipment. What does that mean?
It means you shouldn't have it with dairy unless it wasn't a ben yomo.
So I shouldn't eat it with dairy. What if I accidentally put cheese on it?
What's it
Wait,
called?
while it's still in the
Bidi evidence,
pot, while it's
okay.
on my plate.
Took it out of the pot, put it on my plate, put some parmesan on top.
Bidi evidence, okay.
So Svardim would say that you could do that ideally.
Oh.
Ashkenazim are a little more stringent on that question. Ideally, you shouldn't. That means ideally in the first case. But if you did it accidentally, that's fine. That's not messing anything up. Why? Because what happened to the flavor of the meat? I had meat. Let's say that there was flavor in the walls of my pot that's meat. That flavor went into the water, which then went into the pasta. whatever flavor of meat entered into those slivers of pasta is so weakened that it is not going to generate basar b'chalav when it mixes with the cheese. There's just not enough there. There's not enough. So the flavor that's there is such a weakened form of meat that it's not going to be problematic. Now, this question comes up all the time, right? I get this question all the time. Rabbi, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I just used, we made something parav, but it was from Shabbos leftovers. I don't know. You have mashed potatoes that like a parav, and I just ate it with a milchik fork. What do I do with a fork? Nothing. Just rinse it. Because whatever flavors of meat got into the mashed potatoes that you're eating with your milchik fork, there's flavor of milk that's strong enough in that milchik fork that's going to mix with the flavor of meat that's in the mashed potatoes to make that basar b'chalav. That's impossible.
Also, wouldn't the temperature of the meat, the potatoes,
Right, and
not
meaning, and that
be enough
if
to be considered
and that's even before we talk about temperature,
Okay.
right? Meaning, even if it was boiling hot, you're not gonna. That's what's called nat barnat dehetera, which means translation. Nat is the acronym for nosein tam. Nosein tam means it gives flavor. Nat barnat means a giving of flavor, the son of a giving of flavor, meaning second degree transfer of flavor of something that's permissible. That flavor is far too weak to generate any prohibition. Meaning,
What if you did it with an onion?
so an onion has interesting additional properties of being sharp, so that will bump it up a level. So, for example, if I have a knife that is fleshik and I cut an onion with that knife, so even though the onion is parav, the onion is considered to be sharp enough that it will draw out real meat flavor. We assume that the onion was meat, that it takes on the identity of what was in the knife.
Use your milchik fork on the onion sliced with the fleshik knife. You now have an issue with your fork.
Maybe it depends. It depends. That would depend. That would depend. I'll tell you why.
No. Without temperature.
I think onion, the sharpness works the same way as temperature.
So
Right.
to a certain extent, if the onion is cooked, the sharpness is gone.
Oh, wait. So it's one or the other.
Yeah,
Oh.
a cooked onion is not sharp anymore.
Okay.
Oh,
And
sweet.
Right, meaning
how many-
caramelizes.
From the gourmet perspective, whatever. but
Right.
Okay. How many elements do we need to tip us over into problem land? Right. If we just have the sharpness, or we just have the temperature, right? Is that enough, or do we need like 2 elements, or just? Like,
So depending
what's
on
a
what.
critical mass?
Yeah. So each one of those has slightly different like halakha considerations. In order for an onion to be a problem, it needs, according to most poskim, it needs both a knife and the onion.
Sorry. It needs both a knife and the onion.
Both a knife and an onion in the absence of heat.
So what does it mean? Have a knife, right? How does it affect our fork? The
It
knife
doesn't
goes-
affect. It doesn't affect the fork.
So, okay. So if we cut it with a meat knife and then we're serving it on our plate and then we have a milk fork and milk knife and then we cut.
Right.
the
So
meat,
then it would be a problem with it.
now
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
milk knife is screwed. Is our milk
Uh,
fork screwed as
Oh, you have
well?
to
No,
cut
probably
the-
not.
So it's just the milk knife is screwed.
yeah. Depending.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I gotta
Cutting
be
an
comfortable.
onion, that's the issue.
Yes.
It's stabbing the onion that is
No.
different.
Yeah. So the person asked the question.
Eat Asian cuisine, only bite-sized use your chopsticks, you're good.
Right. So the person asked the question of what we refer to as ducha de sakina, the pressure of the knife. If that could apply to other utensils as well, or it would need like the surface area of the knife in order to make that problematic. But I'll tell you why am I sharing all of this with you? Because the same is not true if the flavor that's in the wall of your pot is pork, right? Meaning if I cooked pasta in a pork pot, so the flavor of pork went into the water, and the flavor of pork in the water went into the pasta, that pasta is pork. It's treif. You can't eat that.
Really?
Yeah. Not barnat the isura is a problem. Not barnat the hetera, if it is second, third, fifth degree taste of something permissible, so that flavor will weaken. But when it comes to something forbidden, we're concerned at every level of it. We're concerned that the flavor of the water is now pork water. And you cook pasta in pork water.
So a trafe knife that cuts an onion, that onion's trafe.
Trafe, yeah.
It's a question. What if we have, and forgive me, I don't have a command of the Hebrew vocabulary. What
You're
if we
forgiven.
have- Thank you. What if we have a non-kosher slaughter meat that we have cooked in there? So it's a kosher animal,
Right.
but its meat is not kosher prepared.
That's,
So
yeah.
we bought goyish beef that we cooked in there, and then we cook our pasta in there later.
Goyish beef.
So the goyish beef water has infused it. Is this the realm of pork? Is this the realm
Both,
of-
actually. Both. So you're gonna
Oh, yeah.
you're going to we assume what's called chatich chanas and avela, that the prohibition carries to every degree.
Okay.
So you would end up with dual prohibitions here. You would have the pasta, which we would consider to be identical with treif meat.
Mhm.
So eating the pasta by itself would be problematic. But also, once you put Parmesan cheese on it, it would be basar b'chalav, because it's got flavors of non-kosher meat
So
and
there's
flavors
no
of cheese.
allowances. Whereas if you're at least mostly fastidious and you're cooking your actual kosher beef in there, then you get your mulligans. But if you're messing up something so fundamental, then
That flavor-
no principle of charity. It's all against you, my dude.
Right.
Okay.
So here's where things get funky.
Makes sense.
Yeah. You don't have to be that much of a shlomo or a shlomazel or whatever.
Right.
the term is.
So the identity of chametz is now incredibly peculiar. Because here's the question. I made kosher pasta in my kosher pasta pot 2 days before, a day before Pesach, right? Erev Pesach in the morning, where I can still eat chametz. Chametz is allowed. By midday on Erev Pesach, all the chametz becomes forbidden.
You got to throw your pot out, man. It's
Well,
the only way to be sure.
so hold up a second. Is the flavor in the pot like kosher meat or not kosher meat?
So I can not cook
Not
meat in
kosher
this. My
All the time, and I'll tell you where it comes up. These are the questions that, like,
Ask ChatGPT.
yeah, you were cooking for Pesach. You're cooking for Pesach, and it's a week before Pesach. So, like, you've kashered half the kitchen, and half the kitchen, like, you've got like the mechitzas, right? You know, like half the kitchen is like the Pesach side, like yeah, don't put right, right. You eat like leftovers until you die. Right? That's Erev Pesach is like the hungriest day of the Jewish year. There's you can't eat anything, right? You're not allowed to eat the chametz stuff. You're not allowed to eat the Pesach, right? So like 3 days before Pesach, you're cooking in the kitchen, and lo and behold, like you messed up, and you used something chametz stick to make your Pesach food. Now, if you would do that on Pesach, chuck it, right? Chametz utensils on Pesach. But this is before Pesach. Is chametz asur before Pesach?
No, but you're not. It's
No.
not about
No, but you're
eating
going
it.
to
You can't eat it on Pesach.
Pesach.
Ah,
There's no way you can eat it on Pesach, or else everyone would do that thing you just described.
Now-
And nobody does that, so therefore it can't be true.
so chametz before Pesach, get this, is heter. It's allowed. Which means, you'd mentioned it before, we have a principle in halacha called bittul b'shishim.
Yeah.
Now, you're not allowed to ever be mevatel something intentionally. We don't want to intentionally nullify anything.
Oh, but the evidence, okay?
But if you accidentally messed up and used the wrong pot, the wrong utensil, and it was before Pesach. So long as there's 60 against the chametz, and it's before Pesach, this is called heter bala. Before Pesach, that chametz is nullified.
What does that mean to
You can
the?
eat it.
How can it be batal b'shishin? Like there's
Save it for dessert.
the pot is so big that the volume is
Sorry, can I back now?
I got you.
the volume is over 6 of the.
Let's say not a
percent.
pot. Let's say you use the ladle.
Okay.
Ladle that can show up a lot, right? Ladle's for sure less than 60 against.
Okay,
your-
ladle is easy to do.
Right.
But the actual utensil that you cook it in, like a pan or a pot or something like that, that seems to be like it would be too much.
Maybe depends on the volume of the pot,
If you
and
have
you
a
could figure it out.
gigantic one, you're
Yeah.
probably fine.
So, and then you have to figure out, like we were discussing before, whether you have to measure against the thickness of the walls of the pot or the
If you-
or just the
right.
sliver
If
of
you
the
do
inside of
so
it.
Let's say you do it intentionally.
Yeah. So that's an
You
issue.
can't serve that on Pesach.
Correct. But I think where else it comes, it
As
comes
long as
up.
you do it like, oops, while you're doing
As
it.
long-
It's my only ladle.
So-
I can't find the other
Right.
one. Oops.
It's my only ladle. Oops.
Oops.
You hear that? This is completely accidental.
I'll tell you where else this comes up.
I don't know. Who are you talking to? I'm just clearly explaining my mistake here.
Right.
Unintentionally.
I'll tell you where else this comes up. I get this question at least like every second year or so. It doesn't happen every year, but it happens often enough. Somebody calls me up. It's Erev Pesach, 3 p.m. So chametz is awesome at this point in time, right? And says, Rabbi, I just looked at the box of the black pepper that I was using, and it's the same brand, and they have a Kosher Pesach one that has the certification and one that doesn't, and they were both sitting on the same shelf, and I bought 2 boxes of whatever it is, this ingredient,
You're good.
and I just realized that I've been using the one that didn't have the OUP on it. I was using the other one. It doesn't have Pesach certification. So if it's already Pesach or after noon on Erev Pesach, so that's a problem. Because any chametz that's there is not batal at all. But if you used it before noon, me'ikar adin, right, or like the day before, so whatever chametz is there is batal. And that's an important consideration, because chametz before Pesach is heter gomer, is totally permissible. Chametz on Pesach is isur gomer, is totally forbidden. Now, because of that stark difference between before and during, that is one of the reasons that the Gemara in Pesachim describe, because people are so used to eating chametz. There's nothing wrong with chametz. 358.5 days of the year, right? There's nothing wrong with eating chametz. Because of that, the Chachamim were much more machmir, they were much more stringent with chametz on Pesach. Because you're far more likely to mess up with Pesach.
That's why you can't see any chametz on Pesach, but on Yom Kippur you can have food out.
Right. You meaning on Yom Kippur, you're not going to accidentally
You're not
eat.
accidentally eating it.
Yes.
Food.
Meaning there's far fewer restrictions on like what you can have in your immediate vicinity, right? But what we'll see next week is that on Erev Pesach, especially on Erev Pesach, but throughout Pesach, like all the times that the Torah gives for when things become also, the Chacham like rolled it back earlier. So they kicked in the Isurim earlier so that you're safeguarded, like, I messed up. I didn't realize what time it was. No, right? So everything was rolled back earlier. All the times, like when you see the latest time to eat chametz and the latest time to burn chametz. So all of those things are rolled back an hour earlier, so that you don't end up messing up your times and then violating the surim of, not eating, not owning, not using chametz and benefiting from chametz and Pesach. Okay, that is our opening to to Pesach categories. And please God, we will continue next week with some important applications of how the timing works and how this relates to a lot of other areas of Hilchos Kashrus. So, rock on.
Thanks, man.
All right.